The next American president must grapple with two wars: in Gaza, where Hamas's health ministry today reported a death toll of over 41,000 Palestinians, and in Ukraine. Both wars threaten regional order and could explode into larger conflicts. Vice President Harris and former President Trump have different relationships with the key players, Putin, Zelensky, and Netanyahu, that will influence their respective efforts to end these wars. Our chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell reports from Ukraine tonight, and our chief national correspondent Matt Gutman is in Israel.
Vice President Harris and former President Trump take the debate stage tonight at a crossroads in U.S. foreign policy, with the next president likely tasked with charting a new course for two historic regional conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine. The discovery of 6 murdered hostages in a Gaza tunnel last weekend, including American Hirsch Goldberg Pollen, sent U.S. officials scrambling to devise a new strategy to advance a ceasefire deal that could bring the remaining hostages home. Last Monday, President Biden's criticism of Netanyahu was blunt.
Mr. President, do you think it's time for Prime Minister Netanyahu to do more on this issue? Do you think he's doing enough?
No.
But Hamas and Netanyahu so far not budging.
If you want to destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities, you can't let Hamas rearm. It's obvious. So you have to control the corridor.
The Israel-Hamas war has deeply divided Democrats, Harris facing calls from so-called uncommitted voters to break from Biden's positions and demand a unilateral ceasefire, as well as stop providing arms to Israel. She has so far refused.
I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7.
At the same time, she has made clear that she stands for and will pursue Palestinian self-determination and to give Palestinians a perspective that offers them dignity and that offers them self-rule.
Still, Harris has yet to articulate the specifics of her plan in the Middle East, but is largely expected to continue Biden's approach.
Is it a tough balancing act? Yes, but I think it's one that the United States and Israel ultimately have to pursue. And in some ways, we've seen the result here in Gaza of what happens when you have someone like Trump in office who puts together a peace plan that ignores the Palestinians, who supports more Israeli settlement. You get an explosion of frustration.
Meanwhile, Trump has taken to slamming Biden and Harris for the hostage executions by Hamas and blaming the horrific loss of life on poor leadership. Last week, writing, "They have blood on their hands." The former president has long cast himself as a stalwart defender of Israel, moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Israel's capital, Jerusalem, in 2018. Israel has long lobbied for that move, but previous administrations held it out as an incentive to be delivered after the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside Israel. Trump telling Fox News in July that Israel needs to end the war in Gaza as soon as possible.
You have to end this fast. It can't continue to go on like this. It's too long. It's too much. You got to get your hostages back.
But a day later, meeting with Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago, Trump publicly only mentioning the hostages and not the pace of the war.
That's a very tough situation. The hostages, they have to be given back immediately because there can be no way that they're in good shape.
Trump's July comments coming after Netanyahu praised the former president during his address to Congress, a speech Harris and half of all congressional Democrats did not attend, although Harris did meet with Netanyahu afterwards.
From Netanyahu's perspective, you could call it either way. On the one hand, he may want someone like Trump who gives him a wider berth. On the other hand, Kamala Harris gives him the ability to push back against his own far right and to say Washington is pushing me to make progress on the Palestinian issue.
When it comes to Ukraine, the stakes couldn't be higher for the war-torn nation. Ian Pannell is on the ground for us this week in Kyiv.
The rusting remains of Russia's war machine here on Mykolaiv Square are a good reminder for Ukrainians every single day that this war, now almost 2.5 years long, is still very much active. But they don't need this to remind them. There are the constant air raid sirens, the bombs, the missiles, the rockets, the artillery, the attacks by Russians who are advancing even now on the eastern front line. So this presidential election could not be more important to Kyiv.
Ukraine's received over $175 billion worth of US aid since the start of the war, the most from any nation by far.
A lasting peace for Ukraine must be underwritten by Ukraine's own ability to defend itself now and to deter future aggression anytime in the future.
We must be unwavering, and we cannot play political games.
If she wins in November, Harris is largely expected to continue the Biden administration's approach to the war, offering aid to Ukraine through a multilateral approach. Her willingness to lift restrictions on the use of long-range weapons against military targets within Russia remains unknown. But as the November election inches closer, so does Russia's advance on Ukrainian territory.
The Ukrainian incursion into the Kursk region of Russia took the Russians by surprise. But I think it's also to throw Vladimir Putin off. To change the dynamics in this conflict, where the Ukrainians are really struggling on the eastern flank with these continued Russian assaults.
Trump, on the other hand, has vowed to end the war in Ukraine on day one if he's elected.
Within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over. It'll be absolutely over.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing.
With no details on how he'd achieve this, analysts say the pledge isn't feasible.
Former President Trump has said that he will end this war in one day. Is that possible?
Ні, це неможливо. Це ж не війна, ще раз, це не війна про якусь маленьку територію, про, скажімо так, про частину України чи про все, що говорить Російська Федерація. Це війна про те, які будуть правила в світі існувати.
Even so, a Trump victory could mean a dramatic reversal of US military, intelligence and political support for Ukraine. Trump often praises Russian President Vladimir Putin when speaking of him, even implying he'd give Putin the green light to invade NATO member states that aren't meeting their military spending goals.
If we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
Putin stirred the pot last week when he very publicly endorsed Harris for president in an announcement drenched in sarcasm, saying she laughs so expressively and infectiously that it means she's doing well.
I think this is a fair amount of trolling of Vladimir Putin. And I think that's also why we've seen the DOJ opening up an investigation into Russian alleged disinformation efforts that presumably are meant to help President Trump in the election.
And though they've spoken more recently, Trump's relationship with Zelensky is said to remain frosty, since an infamous phone call in 2019 ultimately led to Trump's first impeachment, when he allegedly withheld $400 million in aid and weaponry under the condition that Zelensky promised to investigate Hunter Biden, the president's son, and his involvement in the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. Trump telling Zelensky there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, so if you can look into it.
There's a lot of baggage between these two men. Obviously, President Zelensky would be ready to work with whoever the next U.S. president is. But I think he certainly hopes that the next U.S. administration will continue the type of strong assistance that we've seen from the Biden-Harris administration.
This debate, this election, is crucial to the future of this war. Even Zelensky is expected to watch tonight's face-off. But for ordinary battle-weary Ukrainians, the stakes right now couldn't be higher.
And joining us now is Matt Gutman from Jerusalem and Ian Pannell from Kyiv. Ian, let's go ahead and start with you, because Trump has praised Putin's invasion in the past as genius and savvy. Is there any reason to believe that he'll distance himself from Putin this evening?
I mean, I think the first thing is it's very hard to predict exactly what Donald Trump will do. He's not entirely consistent in his policy, either domestic or foreign. But I think the feeling on the ground here is at least Harris would represent some kind of continuity, and Donald Trump represents the unknown. I think a lot of people are going to be watching the debate tonight. I think it matters for a lot of people. It doesn't just matter for Ukraine, though. I think it's the signals that America sends, not just to this region, but to elsewhere in the world. I think China China, Asia, Europe, everyone is going to be watching what happens here. And the decisions that are taken after November, or certainly after January, after the inauguration, are going to matter hugely to this country.
And Matt Gutman, as we come to you here, we do have some live pictures that we want to show you. These are images of Gaza war protesters outside of City Hall here in Philadelphia. So Matt, what are we hearing tonight about Trump's likely line of attack against Harris regarding the war in Gaza?
You know, before that, just a couple of hours ago, with the Israeli military releasing this video showing the tunnel in which those 6 executed hostages were held, including American Hirsch Goldberg-Pollen. And you'll remember his parents addressed the DNC just a couple of weeks ago. That video is likely to unleash fury and renewed accusations here in Israel that Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has been dragging his feet on a deal that would have saved those very hostages. So when you ask Israelis and Palestinians what they're looking for Vice President Harris, is something that she might offer that might be new than the Biden administration has been saying for the past couple of months, despite the best of intentions and a tremendous effort. But that peace deal, that hostage ceasefire deal, remains elusive. For President Trump, this is going to be a much easier thing to offer. He is going to retread his previous lines that had he been president, October 7th would never have happened. He would have been able to have strong-armed both Netanyahu and Hamas into some sort of deal that would have saved the lives of both Palestinians and those hostages with.
And so much at stake with both of these conflicts. Matt and Ian, thank you so much for your reporting.